Historically, artists trying to draw accurately have used various mechanical aids. At the most basic, this might involve using a stick to measure the relative sizes and angles of objects. This was sometimes elaborated by positioning grids of string and wood between the artist and the subject. It was also discovered that a pinhole in the wall of a dark room could be used to project an inverted image. In 1490, Leonardo da Vinci outlined this procedure in his notebooks. You will catch these pictures on a piece of white paper, which placed vertically in the room, not far from that opening, and you will see the objects on this paper in their natural shapes and colors, but they will appear smaller and upside down. What may have been suggested here is tracing. That is, beginning a drawing over the projection of an image, in this case with the light coming from the object itself. Over time, draftsmen invented ways to make the dark room, the camera obscura, into mobile contraptions. And eventually, with the addition of lens, mirrors, and ground glass, the dark room became a dark box. In the 1830s, a pair of French inventors thought to put a plate coated with light-sensitive chemicals inside this box, leading to the first permanent photographic images. And the roles of realistic painters were forever changed. Naturally, many artists of the day perceived this new technology as a threat to their livelihood, but others were excited by the possibilities. The established painter Eugene Delacroix was among those who embraced the photograph for the purpose of figurative studies. The daguerreotype is more than a tracing, it is the mirror of the object. Certain details almost always overlooked in drawing from nature here take on a characteristic importance and thus introduce the artist to a complete knowledge of construction as light and shade are found in their true character. Painters of all types were quick to experiment with photographic images. A readily available postcard might become the basis for a succession of compositions. It was no longer required to have a real subject in order to create a credible drawing, or to capture a pattern of light and shadow. Edgar Degas was an early adopter. He experimented with portraits, here making a small one from a celebrity photograph. Degas was something of a recluse, and except for select friends, he greatly valued his privacy. He was happy to create compositions in the comfort of his studio. He didn't even particularly like having professional models around for any length of time. When Edward Muybridge published his stop-motion photos of horses, Degas was pleased to use them as references in several of his pictures. For many artists, photography was capturing, for the first time, credible images of subjects that could never have been posed, and they were seeing new possibilities. A London-based French artist, James Tissot, was invited to join early Impressionist exhibitions, but he politely declined. He was quite busy making and selling realistic and detailed pictures to fashionable middle-class patrons in his adopted country. Charming scenes, often including very young children, had become quite feasible to paint and were very popular. Tissot produced many of these, as well as complex, realistic pictures of shipboard leisure and romance. By the 1880s, photography was quite commonplace, and almost everyone was having a go. And it wasn't necessarily a case of tracing an image. A photograph could be used as the basis for a painting that was going in a new direction. Even artists who didn't paint particularly realistically might use photographs as aids to memory. Photographs might also provide accuracy in situations where access to the subject was limited or impractical. By the turn of the 20th century, more and more realist painters were taking matters into their own hands and creating reference images for themselves. Even artists with public images as very traditional artists were often incorporating photography into their methodologies. For instance, in the 1980s, the caretakers of the Anders Zorn estate made public a large collection of the artist's photography, taken on location, where the circumstances and the difficulty of posing models would have made photography invaluable. Even though as a young man Zorn was recognized as a draftsman, as his career expanded, he made free use of photographs to improve his work. The absolute consistency of his proportions, anatomy, and shapes of light and shadows are probably the result of this. It is only occasionally possible to match particular exposures to particular paintings and prints, but the evidence that photo shoots took place is unmistakable. Throughout the following century, painters of all kinds at least dabbled with using photos. The convenience was just irresistible. Even with studio work, there became less reason to burden a model or a subject with long hours of posing, especially when the artist planned to make deliberate stylizations and to invent his own color schemes. Sometimes even vintage photographs were repurposed for very modern approaches. The subjects might be memories of times past, placed in a new context. And even an artist skilled in traditional working methods might bring life and a sense of artistic exploration from the foundation of a photographic reference. Even if the photograph itself was not especially successful. Other modern artists celebrated the objectivity of the photography itself, even to the point of making themselves into a semi-mechanical human filter of photographic images. Simultaneously, illustrators capitalized on the technology to produce effective pictures within the deadlines demanded by modern industry. Illustrators with very detailed styles could not afford to ignore the advantages of photography. Norman Rockwell, one of the best-known illustrators of the 20th century, began his career drawing from live models, but reached his zenith with a method based upon carefully posed photo sessions. An optical device allowed him to project his studio shots onto a drawing board or canvas. Studies could be submitted for approval to clients on their way to becoming full-color paintings ready for publication. Although Rockwell's work was often dismissed by art critics during his lifetime, some of his pieces eventually resold for prices rivaling those of famous avant-garde artists. Throughout the century and into the next, many illustrators continued to utilize photographs to capture that spark of reality in their subjects. Often, a pattern of light and shade in a few critical areas was all that was necessary to capture the essence of a scene or the likeness of a celebrity. Before the advent of Adobe Photoshop and other graphics programs, artists were still essential to communication in many industries. So we might ask, how many artists over the last 2 centuries have used photography in their process? It probably goes without saying that many artists have preferred to treat their use of this aid as something of a trade secret, and for that reason, much of the evidence of this practice was deliberately hidden. Art is kind of a magic trick, and magicians don't really like sharing their secrets. The truth is, photography has given painters new options for creating pictures of a greater variety of subjects than would have been possible before. This is not to say that artists aren't the authors of their own works, but simply that they will make use of the tools available to them to produce the results that they want. And of course, the photographic camera is just there and has been part of our reality for over 150 years. I hope you enjoyed this video, and check out my other videos on related topics.